How's it going, Dr. B and the TAs? Hope you guys are having a good day so far. My name is Chris Surio. I'm an industrial engineering major, senior this year, and yeah, I guess you're from up in there.
I'm Nick Kokovis. I'm a junior and I'm an aerospace engineering major.
Hey, I'm Turin Yilavanen, and I'm a third-year industrial engineering major.
And I'm Rocco Abusi, and I'm a third-year mechanical engineering major. And today we will be presenting the air standard Brayton cycle.
Alright, hi, I'll be talking about what the Brayton cycle actually is. So the ideal air standard Brayton cycle uses a basic model to represent the processes in a gas turbine engine. It is assumed that only air is being used as the working fluid throughout the cycle. Applications of the Brayton cycle are usually open systems, such as this picture here, in which exhaust freely moves out of the system. While for thermal analysis, we could use the idealized version of the Brayton cycle, as seen here, in which the exhaust is actually being ran through a cooler and then put back into the system, making it closed. The cycle is named after George Brayton, who originally described the workings of a constant pressure heat engine in 1872. So the idea behind the Brayton cycle was to extract energy from flowing air and fuel to generate usable work, which can be used to power many vehicles by giving them thrust. The most basic steps of extracting that energy is the compression of the air, the combustion of the air, and the expansion of that air to create work and also power the compression at the same time. The usefulness of the Brayton cycle is tremendous due to the fact that it powers many vehicles such as jets, helicopters, and even submarines. So the first gas turbine that implemented the Brayton cycle was actually John Barber's gas turbine, patented in 1791, as you can see here. He actually created this engine unknowingly using Brayton cycle's concepts, as the Brayton cycle was not established back then. The idea of the machine was to compress atmospheric air in one chamber and fuel in another chamber, and both chambers will be connected to a combustion vessel. Once the air has been mixed with the fuel and reacted, the energy from the combustion would be used to spin a turbine to create useful work. So here are the three main components of the Brayton cycle: the compressor, the heater, or known as the combustion chamber, and the turbine. So the compressor is the device that is used to compress the gas, and it does that by increasing pressure by reducing volume. For this to happen, power input is required. The combustion chamber, as you can see here, is a cylinder that contains an air and fuel mixture in which it becomes ignited and combusted using some kind of ignition source, such as a spark plug, as you can see here. For the turbine consists of a shaft and many multiple blades in which the combusted air reaches the turbine and does work against the turbine blades and spins the shaft, creating work for the turbine. So here's the ideal Brayton cycle. Here's the ideal Brayton cycle represented on diagrams. Here's the PV diagram, or pressure volume diagram, and here's the TS diagram, or temperature entropy diagram. So some things to point out in these diagrams is that for processes 4 to 1, pressure remains constant, as well as for processes 2 to 3. And for processes 1 to 2, entropy remains constant, and for processes 3 to 4, entropy also remains constant. Heat is being added in processes 2 to 3, and heat is being removed in processes 4 to 1.
Alright, today I'll be going in depth for the 4 processes of the Brayton cycle. Process 1 to 2 is the compressor in the system. In this step, air is forced into the compressor where it's pressurized. This is an adiabatic and reversible process, meaning that there is no heat in and the entropy generated is equal to 0. Using the assumption of constant specific heat, the specific work for this process can be expressed here. The work from 1 to 2 is equal to Cp times the temperature times 1 minus the pressure ratio raised to the specific heat ratio minus 1 over the specific heat ratio. Looking at the PV and TS diagrams here, you can see that as pressure increases, the volume decreases, and as temperature increases, the entropy remains the same. And during this process, work is put into the system. Step 2 of the Brayton cycle is the combustion chamber. This is a constant pressure heat addition process. Here the compressed air runs through a combustion chamber where fuel is burned, heating that air. Being heat addition, the specific heat addition during the constant pressure heat addition process is equal to Q from 2 to 3 is equal to Cp times the change in temperature. As you can see here, the pressure remains fairly constant as volume increases again, and the temperature increases along with the entropy. During this process, heat is added to the system. Step 3 of the Brayton cycle is the turbine. Here, the heated pressurized air then gives up its energy expanding through a turbine or a series of turbines. This is another adiabatic and reversible process, but this time being expansion. The expansion work is given as the work from 3 to 4 is equal to Cp times the temperature times 1 minus the pressure ratio raised to the negative specific heat ratio minus 1 over the specific heat ratio. Looking at the graphs or the diagrams again, you can see that the pressure decreases as the volume increases and temperature decreases while entropy remains the same. During this process, work is removed from the system. And the final step is the heat rejection process. This differs slightly between an ideal and a real Brayton system. In actual practice, the air in the system is generally released into the atmosphere through a series of exhaust pipes after it passes through the turbine. In a real system, the air is passed through some sort of cooler to lower the temperature before it is brought back to the compressor to restart the process. This is a constant pressure energy rejection system. It can be shown as the work from 4 to 1 is equal to Cp times the change in temperature. And for this process, pressure remains the same while volume decreases again, and the temperature drops while entropy also drops. During this process, heat is removed from the system.
How's it going? Here to talk a little bit about modern gas turbines. So, gas turbines transform the chemical energy in fuel, for example, into mechanical energy. So the mechanical energy is generated by the turbine exit shaft and then transferred through a gearbox to the generator shaft, and now electrical energy can be formed. So it's usually generated a low or medium level of voltage to better manage the power loss when you're transmitting like over long distances in transmission lines, and the voltage will be increased by step-up transformers and then distributed to like the local grid. So whenever it'd be entered into your house, for example. So to transform chemical energy into mechanical energy, the fuel gas we burn in the combustion chamber of a gas turbine, and air and heat are going to be needed to be added to the fuel. The most critical process in normal turbine operation is to manage the combustion and produce a proper amount of pressure exhaust gas. Getting the balance is quite important. So I guess I have a little image here of a cross section of a turbine. In an ideal Brayton cycle, it's composed of 4 processes: 2 isentropic processes, which are reversibly adiabatic, and 2 isobaric processes. So first, the gas is sucked into the atmosphere to the engine combustion chamber, and as the working air is sucked in, the combustion blades and the combustion chamber compress it in a way that there's no change in heat. Due to the compression process, the temperature and the pressure of the gas is very high, but they decrease in volume. So this process is also known as the reversible adiabatic process because it has no heat transfer. So air combustion, or not combustion yet, but compression of the gas, and then it is moved into the combustion chamber. So in the isobaric heat addition process, as the isentropic process is completed, the compressed gas is transferred to the combustion chamber where an external source is used to provide heat to the working gas. So due to heat compression, the compressed gas ignites and the ignition process is further able to add heat to the gas. During the whole process, the enthalpy of the working gas increases, but the pressure remains constant. So the net heat provided, continues. And then next, in the third stage, the isentropic expansion stage, the heat compression gas enters into the turbine area where it expands, and as the gas expands, the pressure and the temperature reduce, but the entropy remains the same. So in this process, the gas works on the turbine and it turns the turbine blades. The blades rotate, operate the crankshaft, which further moves the vehicle wheels, or is able to produce mechanical energy in terms of a crankshaft. And finally, in the isobaric heat rejection phase, the unused heat of the gas expels via the heat exchanger due to the temperature of the gas decrease, but the pressure remains unchanged. So nice little cross section. Next slide. This is a picture of a gas turbine. Got one more coming at you. The next one. Yeah, they're quite large too, as you can see, and they range from various sizes. So, this is an example of a gas turbine engine running. Pretty powerful, as you can see, I guess. And so another cool application of the Brayton cycle was the first submarine that was ever produced by John Holland and the Fanny Ram. This is actually his second iteration of the submarine. But it used a two-cylinder Brayton oil engine to be able to actually successfully dive and submerge underwater. It was first commissioned by the Irish Fenian Brotherhood, an anti-British Irish group planning to use it to sink British shipping. So, all in the efforts of war, I suppose. This is a picture of it, and this is John Holland here. He actually piloted every prototype of his submarines, which I think is crazy. But this is a list of all his achievements here. Him getting out of, I believe, the Holland 4, and this is his first prototype, the Holland number 1. It's crazy how small it really was to barely fit one person inside of it. But I guess that's all I have for you today, but thank you.
So I'm going to be talking about the Brayton cycle and air-breathing jet engines today. So spinning fan blades at the front of a jet engine intake air from the atmosphere around it into the jet engine. And then the compressor here is going to use many sets of fan blades attached to a shaft to increase the pressure of the air by decreasing its volume and push it into the combustion chamber. Once in the combustion chamber, jet fuel is going to be injected into this compressed air, and spark plugs are going to ignite the fuel-air mixture. When that fuel-air mixture is ignited, it's going to combust and expand, releasing energy and propelling the aircraft forward as these exhaust gases are ejected out of the back of the nozzle of the engine, as you can see here. So as the gases pass through on their way to the nozzle, they're going to pass through the turbine, another set of blades attached to the same shaft as the compressor, and when these gases turn the turbine, they're also going to turn the compressor, powering the compression and making the whole process a cycle. Now I'm going to be talking about the Brayton cycle and ramjet engines. So a ramjet is a simplified jet engine used on supersonic aircraft which feature no moving parts. So no spinning turbine, spinning compressor like in a typical jet engine. So instead of a spinning compressor, the speed of the vehicle rams air into the static compressor at the front of the engine with such force that it greatly increases the pressure. The engine inlet needs to slow these air to subsonic speeds for the combustion chamber, In the combustion chamber, fuel is mixed with the air and ignited by spark plugs again. This mix of gases is going to expand and produce thrust as it's ejected out of the back of the aircraft at supersonic speeds. Instead of a turbine to power compression, as in the last jet engine, faster speeds are going to make the whole flight a cycle, and faster speeds will actually make it more efficient as it's going to create more compression at the front of the engine to a point with aerodynamic inefficiencies. This is going to create a max speed of about 2,500 miles an hour for the SR-71, and again, that depends on aerodynamic inefficiencies at the inlet of the engine because you need subsonic combustion. Now I'm going to be talking about scramjet engines, and these fixed some of the inefficiencies of ramjet engines to allow for supersonic combustion within the combustion chamber. So you don't have to slow that air down at the inlet like in a typical ramjet design. And so these open up the possibilities for a lot faster air-breathing flight. NASA's X-43A test aircraft is probably the most famous flying example of this, and that reached speeds about 7,400 miles an hour, about 3 times faster than the SR-71, and this is totally air-breathing. Now I'm going to be talking about how these ramjet and scramjet designs fit into the Brayton cycle. As you can see from this NASA chart comparing temperature and entropy, this is the actual Brayton cycle here in the dotted lines, and then the actual lines are the solid lines. And despite their lack of moving compressors and turbines like in a typical jet engine, they're going to still follow the Brayton cycle because they're designed in such a way and their compatibility with supersonic speeds are going to make them a nearly complete cycle, except for this gap right here, which is a result of aerodynamic inefficiencies from the engine inlets. Now I'm going to be comparing these air-breathing aircraft engine designs. So again, jet engines feature compressors and turbines with sets of moving fan blades, while ramjets and scramjets are totally static designs, no moving parts, and depend on the physics of air at high speeds to propel themselves forward. So because of the lack of moving parts, ramjets and scramjets end up being a lot lighter than jet engine designs. But ramjet and scramjets cannot create static thrust, so they need to be brought up to speed by some other way. That can be dropped off from another aircraft, or in the case of SR-71, it could be a ramjet engine with a turbojet engine also inside. And that's our presentation. Thank you.